So there's this type of comment that shows up on the internet frequently that basically says, oh, you can't make that today. More often than not, when it comes to media, this statement is often associated with Mel Brooks' 1974 comedy, Blazing Saddles. And it's not just internet randos who say this. Prominent Hollywood actors and Mel Brooks himself have stated this in interviews. There's this idea that edgy comedies can't exist today due to PC culture. Really, what this boils down to are people who hold up films like Blazing Saddles, which is an all-time comedy classic, mind you, as the poster child for edgy comedies. But the reasons that people claim it's so edgy isn't that it satirizes the Western genre in a hilarious way, that for a while audiences couldn't take a Western seriously, that it showcases the absolute absurdity of racism itself, but that they think it's funny and great that the movie frequently uses the N-word. It's like, no, that's not why the movie works. This idea that you can't make certain kinds of comedies anymore due to PC culture is just stupid. It's just stupid. Plainly put, stupid. Back in 2019, while on the press tour for his movie Joker, director Todd Phillips said, "Go try to be funny nowadays with this woke culture. There were articles written about why comedies don't work anymore. I'll tell you why. Because all the fucking funny guys are like, fuck this shit because I don't want to offend you." That's extremely untrue. Society isn't keeping you from making shitty comedy, Todd. Tastes change. Cultures change. Look inward and maybe think about why your comedy isn't resonating anymore. I'm sorry you can't use homophobic slurs in your films anymore because discerning audiences don't find that funny. There's still plenty of edgy comedy today. Hell, Jojo Rabbit, where Hitler is literally a comedic character in the film, won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay, and beat Joker 2. Sorry, this is a video game focused channel, not a film one, but I bring all this up because this idea that you can't make that today has been applied as well to Rare's 2001 game, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker's Bad Fur Day was a Nintendo 64 exclusive platforming game from Rare, the developers of such classics like Banjo-Kazooie and Goldeneye. Bad Fur Day actually started life as a cutesy 3D platformer called Conker's Quest, and later became 12 Tales, Conker 64. The game was revealed along with Banjo-Kazooie, and critics who saw the game thought it seemed way too similar to Banjo, and Banjo looked better. So while Banjo-Kazooie would release and receive critical acclaim, Conker's game would go dark, save for an appearance in Rare's Diddy Kong Racing in 1997, and a cute Game Boy Color game called Conker's Pocket Tales in 1999. 12 Tales would later re-emerge as Conker's Bad Fur Day, still a 3D platformer from Rare with a cute-looking main character, but the game was now radically different in tone, an M-rated title with language, crude humor, and intense violence. Sort of taking the piss out of the 3D platformer, in general operating as a parody of the genre. Within the context of the time it was released, Conker's Bad Fur Day was pretty shocking. After a few years of dozens of cute platformer titles to have something so unexpectedly crass and adult, on a Nintendo system no less, was surprising. Rare had dabbled in non-kid-friendly games, but never anything this adult. In fact, the only other mature-rated Nintendo-published 64 game had been another Rare title, Perfect Dark. Nintendo had a reputation as a family-friendly company, so Conker made waves when it was reintroduced. Even Nintendo of Europe declined to publish it, with THQ taking over there. Nintendo would still publish in America, though the game's box art would place emphasis on the M rating, along with the special advisory that this game is not for anyone under age 17, so I guess any parents wouldn't buy it for the kid by accident. I'm sure that didn't stop them, though. I mean, it still had a cute squirrel on the cover, but he looked surly and had a pint of beer in his hand. All this is to say, if you bought the game thinking it'd be a family-friendly romp in the vein of Mario 64 or Banjo, I don't know what to tell you, you just weren't paying attention. So circling back to the question at hand, could Conker's Bad Fur Day be made today? Yes it could. And they have. Sorta. Conker's Bad Fur Day is available as part of the Rare Replay collection for Xbox One, and Conker Live and Reloaded, the Xbox remake that came out in 2005, is also available digitally as a backwards compatible title. Sure, the game is pretty controversial for its time, but looking at the game today, it's not that bad. There's the requisite sex and violence jokes, and really the shock value stems less from the adult content itself, and rather that it's all wrapped up to look, for the most part, like your typical all-ages platforming game. After then 5 years of an insane amount of cutesy 3D platformers from various developers chasing that Mario 64 coin, the genre was saturated and ripe for parody. This kind of calls back to comparisons with Blazing Saddles, whereas it satirized the Western after that genre had proliferated in cinema, Conker satirized the platformer. The game even begins with silly references from a typical kind of quest for a platformer. A queen bee has lost her hive and needs Conker to get it back for her from some pesky wasps. Conker retrieves the hive with nothing out of the ordinary for a 3D cartoon platformer, until once the hive returns it sprouts some guns and the queen bee fires upon the chasing wasps, exploding them into pieces.
Eat that, motherfucker.
That's basically Conker's MO for the first half of the game. Throw the squirrel into seemingly typical platformer shenanigans, only now it features things like a rat exploding from eating too much cheese with little eyeballs on them, a rare trademark at this point, to a bee pollinating a flower. Sudden movie parodies like when Conker fights this big bale of sentient hay that turns into an epic boss battle with Terminator references for days. And yes, there's a boss battle with a giant poo monster who sings opera. It's gross, iconic, and beautiful, what can I say?
I'm going to take your head and ram it up my butt.
Your butt.
My butt.
Your butt.
That's right, my butt.
Ugh.
My butt. My butt.
Conker's Bad Fur Day is M-rated, it's crude, it's violent, it's suggestive in ways audiences had never seen before in a 3D platformer, let alone from a developer as renowned in that era as Rare. There's definitely some controversy at release, with some parents claiming Nintendo publishing the title was like Disney releasing pornography. Seriously, that's a real quote. Along with Nintendo's gaming magazine Nintendo Power not covering the game at all. However, it never really broke out into any pearl-clutching controversy upon its release, mainly due to limited advertising for the game, along with it arriving at the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle in 2001, causing it to fly a bit under the radar. So sure, the game was somewhat shocking and surprising upon release, but it wasn't like a cultural touchstone of depravity, you know? Now, surely with the internet today and video games being exceedingly mainstream in entertainment, way more than it was 20 years ago, Conker probably still wouldn't be considered that controversial if it was released now. Let me tell you why. The parody or satire of anything usually begins to appear after whatever genre it's emulating has been around for a while and saturated the market. There's Blazing Saddles with the Western, and, for a more modern example, there's Deadpool with the superhero genre. Then there's Conker with the 3D platformer. Like I said, the gaming landscape in the late 90s and early 2000s was positively saturated with 3D platforming games from so many developers. Super Mario 64's release in 1996 was an absolute game changer for video gaming, and quite literally, everyone wanted a piece of the action. Next thing you know, there were so many 3D platformers showing up on the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1. Some would become critical commercial successes like Rare's own Banjo-Kazooie, but many would fade into obscurity or at best gain a cult following. There were just too many. So with Banjo-Kazooie already out and successful, Rare couldn't justify 12 Tales Conker's Quest's existence. And now with the game genre inundated with so many similar titles, it was a topic ripe for parody. Rare artist Chris Seavor saw this and came up with a formula where performing the usual platforming actions, like getting the beehive back for the queen, would not lead to a reward like a power star, but instead lead to an extreme punchline to reward the player instead with something funny, violent, and shocking. The game would also poke fun at other platforming conventions, for example by taking Conker's health, chocolate, to actually in-universe justify why the collectible was always unnaturally floating off the ground like most platformer things. Taking tropes like lives and actually giving them meaning and purpose behind them, through comedy of course, really cemented Conker as a strong satirical video game. Getting to the game itself, spoiler alert, but hey, this game is 20 years old at this point, so, you know. Conker's Bad Fur Day tells the story of Conker the Red Squirrel, who one night after drinking too much at the local pub, makes the wrong turn and instead of returning home, finds himself in a new land. Dealing with the area's bizarre inhabitants, Conker works on making money to eventually find his girlfriend Barry, who's vanished, and get home. Elsewhere, the Panther King, the ruler of the land Conker finds himself in, is enraged due to the table next to his throne having only 3 legs, therefore being unbalanced and unable to sit his glass of milk on, satirizing the shallow premises of platformers. One of his scientists, Professor Von Krippelsack, deduces that he needs one red squirrel to serve as the 4th leg, leading to the king sending his minions out to capture one. Conker gets continuously sidetracked with his cash collection as he deals with sentient farm tools, a robot hay bale, an operatic singing piece of poop, the Great Mighty Poo to be precise, and some haughty catfishes dealing with a bulldog shark. After traveling through an area still in the prehistoric times because, of course, Conker discovers that Barry has been kidnapped by the Weasel Mafia. He tries to save her, but she doesn't notice him and the squirrel soon finds himself dealing with zombies and vampires, and eventually being drafted into a war with the Nazi-like Teddies, where Conker ultimately defeats them and their disturbed robot little girl leader. After these many misadventures, did I forget to mention the pooping cows? Conker finds Barry as she and him are recruited by the Weasel Mafia to help them rob a bank. It turns out to all be a trap, however, and the Panther King captures Conker as Barry is shot and killed by Don Weasel, the head of the Weasel Mafia. However, the tricks continue as the room the Panther King traps Conker in launches inexplicably into space. An alien-like creature bursts out of the Panther King's stomach as part of the professor's elaborate plan to finally be free of working for him. Von Cripplesack instructs the alien to kill Conker as revenge for Conker destroying his Teddy's facility, but Conker is able to open an airlock, sucking the professor and unfortunately Barry's corpse out into space. However, just before Conker can deal the finishing blow to the alien, the game freezes in an extremely absurd fourth wall break. Conker is disappointed in the developers for not testing their game for bugs enough, but he then asks the programmers to help him out of the situation. They listen and teleport Conker into the Panther King's throne room, and even gives him a sword, allowing him to finally kill the alien. Because of this, Conker is crowned king of the land. However, he realizes he meant to ask the programmers to bring Barry back to life, but unfortunately, they've already left. The game ends on a pretty downer note, with Conker surrounded by all the weird characters he helped throughout the game, while serving as king of the land, but utterly alone. It's quite the ending. To be fair, the game does open in a Clockwork Orange-style single-shot homage showing Conker as king already, having the game take place entirely in flashback to show the player how he got to where he was in just a day. Mind you, that title is accurate. It's quite the odyssey of a story, and a quick summer like this can't easily capture the absolute madness that is Conker's Bad Fur Day. At least when it came out in 2001, and despite lower than expected sales due to its late in the N64 era release, the game was reviewed well by critics and received well by those who played it. Now, the exact reason why Conker wouldn't make much of an impact today comes solely to it truly being a product of its time. Platformers, while still a genre staple for video games with some standouts in the genre releasing just this year, aren't as commonplace as they were back when Bad Fur Day came out. Parodying platformers would be potentially seen as tired and long in the tooth at this point. Kind of weird to parody a genre that isn't the most prolific in gaming at the moment. Also, the movie references. One of Conker's Bad Fur Day's big selling points was the incredible amount of movie parodies it contained. From Jaws to The Matrix to Saving Private Ryan, there was a lot going on here. Not just parodying platformers, but movies across a bunch of genres. It's very hard for comedy to age well. And while I still find the parodies charming, these references really date the game. That's okay, that's just the nature of having comedy specific to the time of its release. It's fun, but not something you'd see specifically showing up today. No, if Conker would be released today and actually work well in the year 2021, it'd have to update a hell of a lot and find new things to satirize and parody. And its humor, honestly, it really isn't that shocking looking back at it. Especially in the present day. There's games like South Park: The Stick of Truth and Saints Row 4 that easily best Conker in sheer crude, suggestive humor and language. Times change and Conker's humor isn't quite as edgy as it once was. I mean, it's admittedly still absurd to see such cute cartoon characters participating in intense violence and strong language, but the tone is so cheeky and silly it doesn't really feel that transgressive. That's not a knock on the game's quality itself, save for some horrendously awkward N64 shooter controls, it still holds up today. If you want a closer to modern gameplay experience, the Xbox Remake Live and Reloaded is the way to go. It's the same game and same story, but with much better controls. Though weirdly enough, Live and Reloaded caused more controversy than its N64 original, due to the game's language being more censored than before. It's a really minor quibble to be sure, and in my opinion, bleeped out language tends to be a whole lot funnier than the word being said itself, but hey, to each their own. I guess now the answer is more complicated. Yes, you could make Conker's Bad Fur Day today, but it wouldn't work because its material is largely dated and wouldn't resonate too much with audiences. So a lot would have to be changed to be more viable as a product. And getting back to Todd Phillips and how it's allegedly impossible to make comedy today without fear of the PC police or whatever the hell, again, he's flat out wrong. It's entirely possible to be edgy and transgressive with your humor to make it work for today's audiences. Like I said, comedy tends to date itself pretty damn fast, and you have to be able to notice that, understand that, and adapt. Just blaming audiences is lazy. And with Conker, sure, if you want to get down to it, a lot of its characters are overly sexualized and they play into some stereotypes here and there, but due to the game's heightened, off-the-wall, goofy tone, it kind of all works. Barry is absolutely portrayed in what could be considered a misogynistic way, with her design and her personality strictly being sexy. That's her only character trait, sexy. And that's absolutely fair to criticize. However, like I said, every single one of these characters are so silly and over the top in a multitude of ways, it doesn't feel that off base when lined up with the rest of the cast. There's definitely some eye-rolling moments to be sure, but they're extremely few and far between. Tastes change, comedy changes, and audiences and what they resonate with change. It's just the way of the world. A new Conker game could, and should, in my opinion, happen, but it would have to be significantly different from Bad Fur Day to work. Luckily, there's plenty of tropes and genres to take aim at in the games industry and film, so the material is there. You would just have to find a way to make it all work in a modern way. It's a big ask, but it's possible. Nothing is really off limits, it's just how you navigate the line that could push the humor outside the barrier of good taste. With context for when it was originally released, Conker's Bad Fur Day is definitely still worth checking out today. And if you want a slightly more modern experience, there's always Live and Reloaded. But to the people online saying, you can't make this game today, I ask you, why do you actually think that? Because, my god, look around you. Compared to Conker, there's games out there that are a lot more violent, a lot more crude compared to anything that shows up here. It comes off to me as people like Todd Phillips just wishing to go back in time to the days where they could just say things like homophobic slurs and not fear backlash from people who are just asking for respect and dignity. It's not the world that's too soft, it's you. There's no such thing as a good old days when it comes to media, as there's still films and games made today, more than ever before, that tackle sensitive topics and feature transgressive, edgy humor. Again, funny Hitler movie, and Lord, everything in the recent South Park games. It's risky to tackle such subjects, but if you have a creative team that can definitely navigate the material, it's possible. Risky, but possible. And listen, if you think anyone's actually offended by this,
Sweet corn is the only thing that makes it through my rear. How do you think I keep this lovely grin?
there's no helping you. Conker's Bad Fur Day is a fascinating time capsule of a game that really was lightning in a bottle. I don't know if we'll ever see a continuation for the hedonistic squirrel, but it is entirely possible for lightning to eventually strike twice. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a comment below, along with giving this video a thumbs up. Also, thank you to my patrons for your month of support, it means the world. And I also would like to thank Jordan O'Neill as well. If you'd like more from me, there's my recent essay on what makes Psychonauts so special, along with my feature-length documentary about the Ratchet & Clank series. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell, and I'll see you later.